Hi, everyone. Welcome to our masterclass program today in personal branding. I'd just like to give you a brief introduction. Our fantastic speaker, Andrew Singer, is a leading expert in today's most discussed energy-related issues. With over 25 years of expertise working with some of the world's largest and most sophisticated energy consumers, Andrew is a nationally recognized speaker on today's critical topics such as the future of alternative energy, why sustainable business practices matter, and how intelligent, holistic, information-based management of energy consumption and carbon emissions will make businesses more competitive, more sustainable, and increase profitability. Andrew is also a tremendous career development expert and resource, and we're very excited to be able to partner with him to provide this masterclass in personal branding. If you have not seen Andrew's previous masterclass in sales, I encourage you all to go to our website and do so. And without further ado, I'm going to pass the session to Andrew.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm Andrew Singer coming at you, as they say, live from America. Nice to see you. I'm in Baltimore. It's a little rainy this morning, but that's okay. I know people are all over the place. Let me just get a quick check. Maybe Nadia, you can tell me video, audio, everything's okay. See the screen and you can see me and you can hear me okay? Great. Thank you, Nadia. Well, it's wonderful to see you. It's a tremendous compliment to me that you asked me back. I guess somebody else wasn't able to make it, so it's good to be here. I appreciate your having me. And I appreciate the introduction as well. And just so people know, don't get scared. We're not going to be talking about carbon-free electricity or hydroelectric power or building a dam somewhere. So we're okay on that. What we're going to talk about is owning your own personal brand. I'm hoping when you leave this session, you'll have some questions as well as some notes for yourselves. I encourage you to take some notes and think about things as we go on. My entire desire here is for you to think about who you are and how others view you and why that's important for your career. Many people over the course of their career never really understand how they are viewed, how they actually view themselves. And sometimes it's too late in their career when they realize that something is not necessarily connected. So I'm going to try to help you connect those things, think about them now, either early on or midway in your career, and hopefully we'll have some questions. I have no problem if people have questions as they're going. It's hard for me to see the chat. So Nadia, maybe, or Jillian, if you see something pop up that's an immediate question, just give a yell, I'll pause, and we'll do that. I only have two screens, so it's a lot to monitor all at the same time. So let's get started. So first off, I am lucky enough to be a husband to a wonderful wife of almost 31 years now. Tell her I got it right, 31 years. And she is a psychologist. So as you can tell, it's good for me to have full-time therapy constantly available. That's a good thing for somebody in sales. And we have 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys, ranging in age from about 28 to 17. And we are blessed with 4 grandchildren so far. I encourage increased grandchildren, so hopefully that will continue to come. But we have 3 little girls and a little boy ranging about 3.5 to 1.5. So that's wonderful. So many, many, many years ago, when I was puttering around on a Sunday, which is what Americans tend to do on Sundays, we only have a 5-day work week. I was in the house alone. My wife was not home. And I think the only person in the house was my little one at the time, was only 5 or 6 years old. And he's following me around a bit, watching what I'm doing. I was cleaning up, maybe making breakfast. Finally, he looks like he needs to tell me something. So he looks at me and he says, "Daddy, where is mommy?" I said, "Mommy's out." And without missing a beat, he looks up at me and he says, "So who's in charge?" My heart sank at that moment. What do you mean, who's in charge? I got this. Just don't need mommy. But I thought about that question for many, many years, and it's always been something that I've talked about. And what I'd like all of you to think about from a brand perspective is who's in charge. And the answer is, on a personal brand basis, you're in charge. You might think that other people define you, but they really don't. You define yourself. So let's keep that in mind as we progress through and see what happens. So first off, I'm going to ask you the question to think about, and maybe you want to jot this down as we're talking. But what's your brand? What I'm looking for from you is maybe one word or a sentence. So here are brands that I'm sure are somewhat recognizable on an international basis. I understand that not many people who are younger these days actually know what the I, the B, and the M are for. They were kind of like a computer company before Apple and others, but they're a big company. You have Barbie dolls there, Coca-Cola, Facebook, John Deere for farming equipment. Got a little Starbucks up in the left corner, some McDonald's coming at you. Vodafone, that's kind of European, so maybe it touches over into all the continents as well. But my question is, when you look at this, Do you get a smile inside? Do you get oh, I didn't like that Coca-Cola. It was flat when I opened it, or it's always bubbly? What's the word that comes to your mind? Tastes great. So cute. Don't like it so much. Works well. I wish I could fix it for less. Expensive coffee. Good coffee. Gives me a stomachache coffee. What's it that coming into your mind when you see these types of things? All of these are recognized brands. Whether you believe it or not, I could take any of your faces right now, put that in one of those circles that pops up. And as long as we have a crowd of people where somebody in there knows you, or a few people do, they're going to see that face and say, what's that brand? Trusted, honest, dishonest, happy, not happy, funny, not funny, amazing at math, terrible at math, speaks well, writes well, trusted friend, not really trusted, never let them babysit for my children, always let them babysit for my children. What is it that people would say if they would suddenly look at your face and say, what is that? So when thinking about what's your brand for a second, I wanted to maybe frame this in a way, the same way you would look at Facebook or Coca-Cola or Vodafone and have that word or that sentence. It can be positive or negative. Now replace your face and think about what you would say your brand is. Is it a word? Is it a sentence? Is it a phrase? What is it that you have there? And if you need some help, think about another person. Think about a famous person. Unfortunately, what comes to mind is an actor or an actress, maybe a sports star, a politician, someone well known for actually helping the world. What's their brand? Do you believe them or don't you believe them? Bill Gates was high up, then he's low down. Then he's high up again, then he's low down. What is it that's there? Picture your own face there. And then also add one little thought, which we'll pick up on in a little while, which is possibly, how are other people seeing you as well? Now, this is all extremely important. I want you to keep this in mind, because whether you're just going to work every day, going to class every day, interacting with others, or what I assume is part of the whole masterclass system, which is being in business, you are your brand. Whether you're part of a large company, an entrepreneur, small company, you are your brand. You're only as good as the first impression that you've made, and you never get a second chance to make a first impression. Do you get a second chance? Yes, you do. Can you repair a brand? Yes, you can. So stay happy, and let's stay with me on this. So think about what's your brand, and maybe a little in the background, do others see it the same way? In thinking about what your brand is, ask yourself the question, what makes you unique? What are your traits? What traits are important for what it is that you do? If you're an educator, are you easily understood? Can you explain difficult concepts in an easily understandable way? If you're in finance, are you able to bring people in with you by explaining difficult concepts? Are you able to understand people's concepts? Are you an organizer? Are you a destroyer? Do you work well in groups? Are you a lone wolf, as we say in the US? You go off and do things on your own and come back with great deals, but you don't want to speak to anybody. Oftentimes in a business situation, you'll get a yearly review. Now, I don't know everybody's background or what everybody's doing, but I think people can relate to this. So you'll get a review of some sort, either in business, maybe you'll get it in school from a professor, maybe you'll get it in life. Somebody will say, hey, let's talk about how you are, but let's stick with the business view. So it's very common at the end of the year for somebody at some point to talk about your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, myself as a manager, it's very easy to find somebody's weaknesses. You could have a whole list of things that you want to tell somebody their weaknesses. Hey, you're not that great at finance. In meetings, people don't really find you exciting. And by the way, I think you need to eat less at lunch. Well, I'm not going to say that to somebody necessarily, but I want to think of a way to say it. In management school, or just somebody telling you how to properly manage somebody, they often tell you to say 5 positive things for every negative thing that you say. I wish it was that easy. People don't often notice the positives of people or their strengths, if you will. People are much more likely to notice their weaknesses in others. You might often find your own weakness, which you won't admit to, in somebody else. You won't necessarily tell them, but you'll notice it. But people often think they have their own strengths, but they won't recognize those in others. So stick with me for a second. Think about the strengths and weaknesses that either people have told you about or that you might be aware of. And we're going to pick this up again on a slide a little later, but I want you to think about that, because the question I would have for you is, you have a weakness. how much better can you actually make it? So you've been in business for many years. Somebody notices you're not as strong in the financial realm as somebody else. Well, where can you get your skills? Are you actually good in math and you just never took the time to understand finance? Well, maybe you can get it up to a good level. You might even be able to make it stronger. I might think that you had already gravitated to it if it was there. Are you a good speaker in public, or are you very shy and you don't like speaking in front of others? Could you take some classes to get a bit better? What I'm going to put out there is the following. Oftentimes with a lot of our weaknesses, we can make them a bit better, but sometimes it's a waste of time to try to turn that weakness into a strength. What if we took that strength and made it even stronger? What if we made that strength something that made you even more successful? Hold that out there as a thought. We'll pick it up again in a second. But in thinking about your personal brand, think about more so those strengths that you have and how that contributes to your personal brand. And think about any weaknesses that you might think that you have. And are those things that you wish were a bit stronger for your brand, or are those things that you don't really need to have? And one last thing that I'll put out there, and this is a management strategy that not many people follow. As people grow in companies or in their own company, and you're managing more people, oftentimes people will get somewhat insecure about things they don't know. An excellent manager does the following. They hire around their weaknesses. An excellent manager and or person, even in meetings or working with groups, they will either encourage, be around people, or hire people around their weaknesses. What does that mean? Let's use the finance example. You own your own company. You've run it since it was small and now it's getting bigger. The entire finance realm is getting much stronger and more things need to happen. It's getting a bit beyond you. You have two choices. You can fake it and fail, or you can find somebody to become your finance director, manager, CFO. In a larger corporation, that's called managerial courage. Having the courage to bring somebody next to you that might not make you look as smart as you think you are, that's a big deal. But by building that consensus and or building that group, you're actually a stronger manager for it. And that might actually be your bigger strength. I know I'm putting a lot of question marks on, but oftentimes in this topic, it's helpful because hopefully many of you are thinking in your very large brains and your very, very, very usable and wonderful opportunities, what it is you can do with this personal brand that we're thinking about. So let's take a look at a picture from the old days. So I don't know how many people watched I Love Lucy on television back in the day. Not sure. It's a very big show here, probably in the 60s, but I love this picture. And there might not be recognizable characters to people. Nadia, you can smile at me. Recognizable or no? Yes? Yes. So what you have on the right is Lucille Ball, who was a very famous actress and comedian a million years ago in the US. And on the left was somebody even more well-known, even many years before, named Harpo Marx, which is part of the Marx Brothers. None of that matters all that much. What matters is what's happening here. If I knew we had really good Wi-Fi, we could do a video, but you can go look it up on YouTube on your own. You're looking for Lucille Ball and Harpo Marx in front of a mirror. So what happens here in this scene? So what happened was Lucy was obviously somewhere she wasn't supposed to do, as is in most comedies. That's at some point, that's the conflict that comes up. And Harpo Marx comes into the room. And of course, Lucy doesn't want to get caught in the room. So suddenly, Harpo walks in front of what he thinks is a mirror. And Lucy, dressed up as Harpo Marx, is on the other side of what is supposed to be a mirror. And they go through a few minutes of a wonderful pantomime copying type scene where every time Harpo lifts up his right hand, Lucy lifts up her right hand. And they blink and he tries to trick her and she catches it each time. But then suddenly at the last second, Harpo takes off his hat. Lucy takes off her hat, holds it out in the air. Harpo drops his hat. Lucy drops her hat. And Harpo's hat is on a little elastic string and it bounces back up to his hand. He puts it on his head and Lucy's hat is on the floor. And they smile and hug each other. Ha, ha, ha. Why am I showing you this? Remember we talked about before about how other people see you? This is a wonderful image to keep in your mind of Lucy and Harpo thought they saw each other the exact same way until Harpo changed the paradigm at that moment. Was there a connection or a disconnection? Is there resonance or dissonance? What am I saying? What I'm saying is you may believe that your brand is X, but the world around you may see your brand as Y. Now, it could be as radical as the following. I believe that people trust me. And you ask the person I'm with the most, hey, what do you think Andrew's brand is? He's a nice guy, good father. It's not really to be trusted, though. He has trouble with trust issues. Wow. That's the hat falling on the ground. Well, Andrew, what do you think is your strongest strength? Well, I think I'm very honest. Ask somebody who sees me, knows me well, what do you think is one of Andrew's greatest strengths? Or what do you think his brand is? You know what? No matter what happens, Andrew's honest. The hat bounces back up. Each part of the mirror is seeing the exact same thing. Why is that important? You might think that you're having a great meeting, but if you really look at the faces in the meeting, connection's not happening. You don't see that lovely concert, that symphony where you're talking and you feel like you're connecting with people. Why aren't you connecting? You might think, look at me. I'm so easy to understand. And they're thinking, look at him. He's so difficult to understand. So in honesty of understanding who it is that you are in your brand, you also need to get feedback. And we'll touch on that in a few slides as well. I'm giving you a few things to think about in each one, as well as thinking about it. And once again, remember, why is all of this important? Because in your interactions in business, it's very important to be able to make connections with the people you're doing business with and with the people that help you do business if you have them in your company or whatever it is that you're doing. And if your brand is not pure and you're not getting a connection between what's being projected and what's being received or understood, that's going to create some sort of disconnect, which will hurt you. You might make $1 million, but you could have made 2. You might have kept your job, but you could have gone farther. It takes hard work and self-understanding to get to where you need to here. So let's go back to those strengths and weaknesses for a second. What if you made that strength even stronger? What if your strength became your superpower? What do I mean by that? I asked all of you to think about what your brand is. I asked you to think about what makes you unique. I asked you to think about some of your strengths that are there. Are weaknesses holding you back? What can happen with them? Do they contribute to your brand? Now think about what you thought was your brand and what were some of your strengths within your brand. What if instead of taking that review, if you will, and spending all your time on trying to become better at calculus, you spent more time trying to become a better presenter, or more time trying to understand your company's market share, or understand how your business would do better partnering with somebody else, or building more marketing tools, because that's a strength of yours. Suddenly you're taking the time to build what it is that made you successful in the first place and turn it into a superpower. If we were live right now, I'd have everybody stand up. I'd ask you to stand up tall, put your hands on your hips, which you can't see. Take a deep breath in and out, and it's that feeling of strength. It's that feeling of I can do anything. But now translate that to something that you're doing in business. Translate that into building the strength that you have even stronger and turning it into a superpower. This is not something that people really talk about. You might hear what's your superpower, things like that, but nobody ever really talks about what one does with it. Your power, your strength is what got you to where you are. But oftentimes you either don't recognize it, or it's much easier, unfortunately, to concentrate on what people tell you you should work on. Remember, if somebody says to you, hey, if you were just a little better at marketing, your business would be bigger. Well, maybe marketing is a weakness of yours. Maybe your strength is actually finding somebody who's good at marketing and hiring them, because you can read people and understand them. All right, so now my question to you is we've talked about strengths and weaknesses, and I've talked a little too much about weaknesses. So let's just finish it off, shall we? What's holding you back? What is it right now that's kind of that little uncomfortable feeling that's like, it's interesting what he's saying, but what's holding you back? So this is a bit of a bland picture, if you will. Everybody tells me that no matter what picture I put here, it ends up getting somebody upset. So I apologize if this picture is good or not good. The point is the following: what's holding you back? So the picture that was often used, which somebody told me they didn't like, so I moved that one, was the picture of the full-grown elephant that has a small string around their ankle, like in the movie Dumbo, and a little pencil almost stuck into the ground holding the string in. I don't know a lot about elephants, but as I understand it, well, elephants are babies. They tie a string around their ankle, put it into the ground as a post, and then they can't pull it out. But it's a learned thing for them so that when they're adults where they could pull it out with no strength whatsoever, they just don't try. So what is it that all of us have that's holding us back? Was it a teacher? Was it a parent? Was it a feeling? Was it a class we didn't do well in? Is it a thought that because I'm not good at this, I can't be good at that? Let's put it all together here for a second. You may be obsessing about something that's a weakness that is not your God-given talent to ever get that much better. But you can let that hold you back for the rest of your career, or you can take the time to recognize what is that talent that has made me successful or gotten me to where I am right now, and how do I make it even stronger? Remember the superpower picture. But the opposite of that, it's not so much a weak, it's what's preventing you from making that strength even stronger. I want to say that again. It's not so much a weakness that's holding you back. It's what's preventing you from doing the hard work of making your strength even stronger. Because let me tell you something, it's easy to take another math class and try to say, hey, I took business math, it's even better. It's harder to make what you do well, excellent, because it takes practice. It takes failure. It takes putting yourself out there. It's a very difficult thing to do. So I would spend a lot of time thinking about some of these things and asking yourself difficult questions. What's holding you back? So what should you do with all this information? Make a little list for yourself. You can put on the top of a piece of paper what you think your brand is. You can put down the pros, the strengths of that brand. You can put down the potential weaknesses of that brand. But then the harder question is look at the brand at the top. Then at the bottom of the page, say to yourself, how do other people see me? Is it the same thing? When looking at your strengths and weaknesses, or what contributes to or takes away from your brand, you have to also ask yourself then, after looking at all those things, I wonder if other people see me the same way. Let's just put Coca-Cola on the top. Strengths. Okay, tastes good. Nice and bubbly. Cool color. Looks great with ice. Weaknesses. Some people don't like all the sugar. The diet stuff has a weird taste to it. It's in a can. It's in a bottle. Doesn't taste good warm. Doesn't taste good cold. Then at the bottom, well, people that don't like all that sugar and caffeine in their lives, they don't think Coke's so cool. They might smile at the ads, but they don't like it so much. I didn't realize so many people didn't like it so much. What do I need to do? Very basic example or very basic way to think about it. But I'm asking you to think about that on a personal basis, which is, how does that reflect you? What do you think your brand is on top? What does somebody else think your brand is in the bottom? And then on the sides, what are the pros and cons or the strengths and weaknesses of both? Because your goal is to get the brand on the top to meet the brand on the bottom, to get Lucy to be the same as Harpo, to get what you're projecting in the mirror the same as what somebody's seeing on the other side. That's the difficulty that I'm talking about in owning your personal brand. If you own your personal brand, there is no conflict between what you're projecting and what's being received. Now, please don't get me wrong. I'm probably the oldest guy on the phone here, and I screw this up every single day. Just ask my wife. Thanks to COVID, I work at home most of the time, or I'm on a plane. This is a very difficult thing to do. And if you think you're perfect at it, that's probably a weakness as well, because you have an inflated view of who you are. But if you're working on this, if you're thinking about this, this is what happens. You always need a Venn diagram. Remember that. You have on the left how you see yourself. You have on the right how others see you. And then in the middle, you have your personal brand. 100% real deal. Your personal brand. Any questions at this point? We're kind of at about 70% of the way through. I don't want to lose anybody, or if anybody has any questions, I'll pause for a second. I know the connections aren't wonderful, but I'll pause if somebody has, either in the chat or verbally.
No, we don't have.
Okay. All right, very good. I'm going to continue on then.
Sounds
So
good.
what are some things that can help you from a personal brand perspective? So here's the first thing, authenticity. So what does it mean to be authentic? It means that you're being transparent. It means that you're looking for that alignment. Remember we were talking about the one side of the mirror matching the other side of the mirror, matching outer expression with an inner experience, matching what you're projecting with what someone is seeing, being the same inside and the same outside. That authenticity is very important. Now, am I asking you if you authentically, enjoy kicking puppies in the street? No, that's not a good thing to do. However, being someone that people can see as being their authentic self, obviously with the proper niceties and the politeness and the humbleness that goes with all the wonderful traits that someone should have both in life and in business, at least to what I was taught. I'm sure many of you as well, probably all of you. That idea of being authentic and believable contributes to a brand that's easily understood and easily conveyed, and then creates that matching, if you will. Remember what we're talking about, the idea of what's being projected is being received, and what people would say is the same as what you think you're doing. You want to work in life to get those two things to match. You don't want to have a dissonance or a disconnect between them, as we said. And if you have that authenticity, what comes from that? Trust. I'm not necessarily talking about the same trust that would be between spouses or between parents and children or between family members or best friends for life. I'm talking about creating a level of business trust. For those of you in the business world, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. I don't think you ever get to the same level of trust in business necessarily. You might over years that you would have as naturally, maybe, or hopefully with someone that's supposed to be in your trust area, i.e. a family member or something like that. However, if you ask anybody about a successful business relationship, a successful business situation that they have, and you ask them to continue to describe it, oftentimes the word, I trust my partner, or I trust the person that I'm working with, will come up at some point. And it's important to recognize that that trust in a business setting is what usually comes from, recognizing it or not, the idea of what you're conveying, i.e. your brand, is what's being received. And oftentimes it's the same with the person that you're dealing with, that the brand they're conveying is what's being received. So you can think about it where all the instruments are in tune, everything's working together to create a wonderful concert or symphony, as opposed to the crazy sounds you would get if, everybody's out of tune, not playing together, not rowing in the same direction, or every other thing you can think of. It's important to recognize that. So the question I'll always get at this point is, I think I'm conveying the right thing. I think people understand who I am. What do I do? How do I do this? So a suggestion that I'll give people is get a mentor who will tell you the truth. Now, mentor is a wonderful word for friend, ally, advisor, person that you work with. Who is it? Colleague. But what's really important? So I don't know what happens in every other part of the world, but oftentimes in the US, somebody at work, usually a young person, they'll say, hey, would you be my mentor? And the person they went up to is usually 4 or 5 levels above them. It's a name somewhere. People know who it is. People often say yes, but the question becomes is, what is it you're going to tell the person? Like, what are you conveying? Always be on time to work. Try not to speak with your mouth open. Don't bring smelly lunches into the lunchroom. Don't put fish in the microwave. What is it you're telling the person if you don't know who they are? These are very funny jokes in the US, by the way. So I hopefully they're converting to everywhere else. If not, you tell me later. Who is it that's giving you the feedback? So I often tell people, if you're going to ask for a mentor or ask somebody to be your mentor, and it's in a business situation, try to find somebody that actually sees you occasionally in a business situation. What I mean is the following. So let's just go with a big company type situation. You're making a presentation, 20 people in the room. One of them is the person that's your mentor. Immediately after the meeting, hi, Nadia, you saw how I did in that meeting? Yes, Andrew, I saw how you did in the meeting. 1 to 10, how did I do? 7.5. Oh, that's bad. Why is that bad? Well, Nadia thinks she's being polite. But here in the US, anything below an 8, that could have been a 2. Somebody's just being polite. Nadia, how did I do? 8. Yes. But what's the question you ask then? Let's say it is the 7.5. And she says it with a smile and with the best of intentions. Nadia, thank you so much for the feedback. Before we forget, can you give me 3 things that would help me go from a 7.5 to an 8.5 the next time I do that? Think about the difference between that question and the following. Nadia's never seen me do anything. I walk into her office and say, hi, how are you? Great. Hey, give me 3 strengths and weaknesses that you notice about me. You're dressed nicely. I think you showered today. I understand your family likes you. Weaknesses. Think about what they have to do now. They have to do research, speak to people. Think about how difficult it is to give anybody critical feedback. When was the last time you told somebody something mean or critical? I mean, I'll tell my kids stuff all the time and then I get in trouble for doing it. But think of it seriously. Think about when was the last time you gave somebody critical feedback. Critical feedback is a gift if it's delivered nicely. If it's not delivered nicely, you have to ask yourself if you can actually take the feedback. But criticism delivered in a proper way, it's a gift. It has a bow on top of it. It's the best package you'll ever get. And if you could actually work through that criticism and make yourself better and turn it into something that helps your superpower grow, oh my gosh. Holiday time has come early. You got a wonderful gift with beautiful gift wrapping on it. So what I'm doing is giving you a suggestion as to how to get feedback out of people without making them uncomfortable. Nadia, how did I do? 7. Thank you so much. If I wanted to get to an 8 next time, what suggestions would you have? Just give me 3 things. Okay, Andrew, good feedback. I know this is going to sound stupid, but your voice might want to be louder. Fantastic. Thank you. Some of your slides, too wordy. You're presenting well, but people are reading instead of listening to you. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And on the slide with the financial stuff, I felt like your confidence level went down a bit on slide 12. Oh, she noticed I'm not good at that. Nadia, thank you for that feedback. You know, finance is not my strength. What would you suggest to somebody? Well, Andrew, come on. What you were presenting, those are things at your level I think you could get more comfortable with. You know what? Why don't you and I sit down, or why don't you go speak to so-and-so about that, or this person can help you, or this is a class that we recommend, or you don't have to be perfect, but I know that you can get to this piece. What was anything that you thought was something that would stand out that I should continue to make even better? I loved you walking around the room and bringing people into the picture. And I love that you made eye contact. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. I look forward to our next meeting. Thanks so much. That's a positive mentor experience. But you're not going to get that if you then go to see the person after the meeting and say, oh, I just got out of a meeting. Oh, how was it? I did great. Oh, you did? What'd you do? Well, I was really loud. I had great slides. Anything you want to work on? Nah, I think it was perfect. What do you think? Well, person's in there. What am I supposed to think? The only feedback I'm getting is from you. Now, the person could go behind you and go ask for stuff and everything, but it's very hard to tease that out of people to get that type of thing. What I'm trying to give you is the gift of getting feedback from people. And you can do it anytime. I don't suggest it on a date necessarily. How'd I do on the date? Well, I'm not going to see you again. Okay, forget that. But anything, just hand it in a report 2 days later. Nadia, what do you think of the report? 1 to 10. This thing was a 9. Really? Thanks. Anything that would get it better? What would take it to a 10? Well, actually, it's interesting you asked, but your footnotes are not in the standard way that we do them at the company. Entrepreneurial type situation. Existing customer. Hey, they didn't do the renewal. I'm so sorry you didn't renew the product with us. Give me an idea. What was your experience with us over the last year, 1 to 10? Well, actually, this year was like a 7. Remember what I told you, a 7's a 2. What could we have done differently to have retained your business? Do you know what's going to happen sometimes? That person is going to end up telling you stuff that you're able to then respond to. They might come back because you care and you're showing what's happening. I often train my salespeople that when things aren't going well, they should actually go in the mode of getting the person they're selling to say no by saying like something like, well, the car is too small for you, isn't it? No, actually, I fit. But you didn't seem to be happy there. I mean, this is not something you want to do. By taking the other side to it, you actually get more honest feedback from people because you make it comfortable for them to give you negative feedback. People don't like saying negative things, at least over here in the US. Not very good at saying negative things. Hey, can I get back to you? Yeah, I'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Everything's 2 weeks here. 2 weeks. 2 weeks is as bad as a 7 and a no. All right. So here's the big question I have for you. And this is where I'm hoping somebody has some questions or something to discuss. Actually, I want to say one more thing here, actually. Just get to change gears just slightly. Because I know last time we were talking about sales, and this is something I've discussed with Jillian before. Many of you have interviews or do interviewing, and I coach with interviewing, and I want to just show how some of these skills work their way into that, and I'll finish with that on this slide. When I'm coaching people in an interview situation, I ask them, what's the most important part of an interview? And somebody will say, well, I need to let the person know how talented I am. I need to show the person my skill in this area, etc. And I'll look at them and say, I think the most important part of an interview is to get somebody to like you in a very short period of time. What do you mean? Well, ask yourself a question. When was the last time you heard somebody hiring somebody they don't like? All right. What do you think people hire a bunch of people they feel kind of neutral about? Maybe. If you're a genius and they need a genius, neutral, you'll probably get a job. But those jobs are hard to find. Albert Einstein, I think, had the last one. But those are hard to find. So what I do is talk to people about how to authentically create a situation where somebody could like you in a short period of time. And I explain to people to achieve it through three things. The first one is to be very, very respectful in your interaction with them. I'm a respectful person. I understand that. Did you hold the door for the person? Did you accidentally sit in their seat? When they offered you a drink, did you say no? Well, I wasn't thirsty. I understand that. In America, when you say no to somebody, they immediately start thinking weird things about you because you've said the word no in the first 15 seconds of meeting someone. I don't know if that carries through in the rest of the world, but in the US, when you say no to somebody in like the first few seconds, that blink thing that Malcolm Gladwell talks about, I encourage people to read that book, by the way, Blink, Malcolm Gladwell, that whole idea of getting an initial view of somebody, the word no is a negative word. You can't get more negative than the word no. You've just said no to somebody. Well, does that mean I'm supposed to accept a drink I don't like with it? Not necessarily, but think twice. Is just saying yes to a glass of water the worst thing in the world? Those are all part of a respect mode. Everything. If somebody's asking to shake your hand, are you shaking it politely? If you're uncomfortable culturally with shaking someone's hand, do you know how to not shake someone's hand properly? There's a way to do that also. And that's something that should be discussed. You don't want to suddenly get all flustered. Second thing is listening. Something that women are extremely good at and men are not very good at. Just ask a man because he's not listening, so he won't hear you. But listening and actively listening in an entire interview situation is more important than you realize. Obviously, your phones are not on. Hopefully, they're in another room. But listening, understanding when somebody says has a question mark at the end, they just asked you a question. Are you answering the question completely and with respect to their time? Are you not droning on? Part of listening is also watching. Do you still have eye contact? If you're on a screen, are you looking into the camera or are you looking away? Are your eyes moving back and forth because you're also reading the newspaper and emails where you're talking to somebody? Think about what it's like to be on TV. We talked about this in the sales class, which is what happens right now on Zoom or Teams or anything else. Very important to listen. And then the last thing I would say is the following, and I don't know if this translates, so somebody, not even have to tell me if it translates, which is think about what makes you most happy. Think about how you are at those moments. And are you being that way in an interview situation? Are you being that way in a business situation? Because I call that being in the zone. Let's say you enjoy a sport. When you're playing that sport, your endorphins are going, you got some adrenaline, you're feeling great. What if you could bottle that and make that always come out at the most opportune times? Well, an interview for a job that you want is a very opportune time. What if you really enjoy being out in the woods? If you enjoy hiking, if you enjoy dancing, if you enjoy being with friends, that special feeling that everybody experiences at some point, you need to recognize when you feel that. I'm touching my chest. You need to recognize when you feel that. That's who you need to be in an interview. Let's say halfway through the interview, you're thinking, I don't want this job. That's for after the interview. During the entire interview, you want that job more than anything else. During that interview, you want that job at that moment more than anything else. What's the worst thing that happens? You get a job offer and you say no. So you say no, but you got the job offer. If you mess up in there because, they didn't tell me that I was going to have to drive 10 miles every day, 10 kilometers every day. I don't want to do that. Well, what if they're paying you double to do that? Oh, maybe I will do that. But you're never going to find that out until you actually go for the whole thing. Why is this connected to personal brand? Who are you at the moment you're in the interview? What is that person seeing? What are you conveying? It's unbelievably important at those moments. And if your goal is to get somebody to like you in an authentic way, Andrew, isn't this tricking somebody? No, it's not. It's not tricking someone. You're doing your work to come across as a likable, friendly individual in a short period of time, because we all know that you have a better chance of getting a job from somebody that likes you than somebody that doesn't like you. And it's very easy to give a bad first impression and then not get a job for the only reason of you accidentally said no to a glass of water or to a cup of coffee. Maybe you should say no to a cup of coffee. You could say, hey, Andrew, would you like some coffee? Hey, are you having any, Nadia? Well, actually, I just had my fourth Starbucks of the day. I'm a little jittery. I don't want any more. You know what? I'm fine too. I just had some before I came in. Thank you so much for asking, though. That's conversation. Says you're a nice person, but it's taking the time to understand the situation. So part of that issue of personal brand is also understanding who you are in those situations as well. So the question I have for you is, what's next? It's my last slide. Hopefully people have taken the time to write a few things down. I highly encourage you, if you found anything helpful in this entire presentation, or if something popped into your head, write it down now, because in about 10 minutes, you won't remember it. In about an hour, you'll forget that we've been talking. But hopefully in about a few months, when Jillian said, hey, you remember that guy? Did you like him? He's like, hopefully you'll say, yeah, I felt good. My goal is that a year from now, hopefully you know that you felt good in the presentation. But my real goal is that you're taking something away, you're writing it down, and you're going to think about it and spend a bit of time with it, or else it's not of the value. So if you feel right now, hopefully, that something was of value, or even if it wasn't, it made you think about something, take the time to write it down, take some notes, write what's important about it, even if you don't do it right now, because you will not remember it in about an hour. Something else will be happening. Something else will be going on. Okay, that's everything. Hopefully, if you have any questions or comments, we can do that. But thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It's truly an honor. So I appreciate it. Okay, so I'll still
I'm
be on
going to
screen.
invite
Yes?
our
Okay.
participants to put questions in the chat, or if there is one ready to go, feel free to unmute and ask a question. And as they formulate their questions, I'm going to ask you a question, Andrew, which is, I know you're an expert in branding and in interviewing. Do you recommend that interviewees ask for feedback in their interviews themselves or after their interviews? And how would you advise career searchers who are undertaking the interview process to approach feedback in that process?
It's a great question. So I would never encourage anybody to ask for feedback within the interview as to how they're interviewing. The only feedback I would look for within the interview is if you're getting a long question of some sort and you're giving an answer, you might want to smile and say, did I answer the question? Is that everything that you were looking for, if you will? In terms of feedback, if somebody offers you a job, you don't need any feedback. It obviously went well. That's your feedback. If you don't get the job offer, then you possibly want to strategize a way to get feedback from people. So a good way to do it would be do you have somebody else that knows somebody that was interviewing you or in the company that you could ask to get feedback for you? Do you feel like you can put a call into the HR department that's there? Can they get some feedback for you? Or did you develop a relationship with somebody where you ask and say, thank you so much for the experience of interviewing. It's a shame that you that it didn't work out this way perfectly, but I'm still unbelievably happy with and impressed by your company, and I'd love to try to work there one day. Do you have any feedback for me that might help me in a future discussion with the company? You won't necessarily get what you're looking for because these people are not necessarily your friends or a long-term relationship. So you're probably going to get some watered down stuff, or we just went in a different direction, or we hired somebody internally, or we went with somebody that, had more experience than you did. So the best way to do it is if you have a connection of some sort or somebody that can get you, because what you're really looking for is that 1 to 10 tough feedback. The last thing I would say is the following. You should develop a strong self-criticism muscle, which is oftentimes people know where they might not have what they need. Like it could be objective. I just don't have these 4 things on that they were stressing. Or it could be subjective. I felt like I lost everybody in the midst of this question. I'm not sure why. And then spend a little time for yourself and maybe replay that to somebody who wants to help you outside of that situation. And maybe they can do a mock interview with you or go over that topic and ask, how did you do that? Last thing I'll say, I'm sorry. The most important question in an interview is tell me about yourself. That's something that you should practice prior to an interview. And what I encourage people to do is to tell a little story about themselves so that they can look for personal connections to the person that's speaking with them. Something as stupid as, I'm one of 10 children. One of 10 kids? So is Bill down the hall. Oh my gosh. Or I had to take off 5 years in between high school and college because I had to work to support my parents because somebody was da 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 da. Oh my gosh. I did that too. Wait, you're from the East Coast? Oh, you traveled through Africa, through Europe. You went to Alaska. Little things that make personal connections make a big difference. More than you asked for, Jillian, but I hope that's helpful.
That's very helpful. I would add that people, in kind of answering the question of who you are and why you're there, people really do want to know what motivates you, and they want not just a statement of what your goals are, but why. Why are they your goals? Where did you come from, and how did that, cause you to have that particular passion and motivation, and what is driving you? And I see we also have a question from the crowd. So is it Moise? Would you like to unmute?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let me just introduce myself. My name is Moise Mahoniman, as you say on the table. I'm a student from Davis College in Rwanda, a current student. Of course, I'm very happy to run from you this person branding. I was very interested to hear this term and to go through about that because it is very needed for someone, especially for university students. Yes, of course, I got to know personal branding, where I have understood that it is comes to explain the uniqueness of personal values, strengths, and skills that is define who you are and what you stand for. Of course, I have two questions I want to ask. As someone who get to know to understand what the personal brand means, what is important of personal brand to person individually, and what is the importance of personal brand to company? Yes, as a worker. And the second question is, how can someone measure the success of personal brand, and what metrics can he use? Yes, that is my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you. What was the second question? I missed one of the words in the key words. Jillian, did you get the key word in the second?
Yeah, I got the question. He was asking that what are some of the metrics can someone use, key performance indicators, to measure the strength of their brand, personal brand?
Right. So Moise, excellent question. Thank you. On the first one, the issue within a larger corporate structure and a business structure is, does your brand match or meld or mesh with that which the corporation has? So as a extreme example, if you're working for a company that's all about sustainable green power, but you give off the impression that all you want to do is burn wood and coal, you're not going to be meshing well with what the company believes. If your brand is one that says, I am open to learning, I am open to adapting, I'm open to learning new things and understanding things and being swayed because I'm open to other ideas, I'm open to what's next, that then would mesh well potentially with that type of corporation. As you're growing within a company structure, your brand should be one of open to learning. Your brand should be one of works well with others. You can also give off strong at delegation. You can give off the brand of what your strengths are, excellent at finance, excellent at marketing. But these are things that, although they are strong for you, the company is looking to see, do they mesh within the total company vision and mission that they have? So it's worthwhile to understand what your company's vision is coming out of university, what's their mission in the world or in the market that they're in, and how do they look to portray themselves. One more example would be is if you're working for Coca-Cola, but you only drink water, you may not be at the right company. So you have to think about how can you adapt and understand what it is that's happening. On the second one, in terms of metrics, the most obvious one is the most difficult one, which is looking at success as well as overall feelings within a group or with others. Meaning, do you feel as if you're having business success, ability to work with others, and ability to do things? If you want to really put a metric on it, if you will, if you have a mentor and your first experience is hello, mentor, remember me? Moise, how did I do in that meeting, 1 to 10? How was that project I did for you, 1 to 10? How was that analysis I did for you, 1 to 10? Is your 1 to 10 growing? Is the first project you did a 7? Is the second project you did an 8? Is the fifth project you did a 10? Those are metrics that you can gather from other people to see that, if you will. The final thing I would say is, from a large company or even a small company perspective, there are various things one can do to test the market that are done through emails, texting, surveys, etc., net promoter scores, customer experience scores. Those are fixed, objective metrics that one can judge how a company is doing. And you can then come back from that to look at, well, what is the company's brand and is it being accepted? Do the individuals within the company promote and work toward that brand? And oftentimes you can see where there are connections and or disconnections or disconnects. Is that helpful?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
I also see that Nadia had a question about other kind of categories of values that represent one's personal brand. In addition to honesty and authenticity, what are the other kind of attributes that one should be thinking about in terms of how they define their personal brand?
That's a great question. So I picked easy words, I picked easy big words, meaning like a big area, like trusting, honest, if you will. I think oftentimes, I think the sky's the limit as to what it is, to be honest with you. I think, to go more specific, I would say financially acute or high acumen within finance. A strength can be conveying ideas. A strength can be patience. But obviously we're in a business setting, so patience within a business setting. Oftentimes, a lot of my salespeople, one of their biggest strengths is, I'll call it the professorial strength. You have the ability to appear to be teaching your customer as well as selling something to them, but not doing it in a bad way. You're doing it in a nice way, but the way that you come across and your style is one of being in a constant didactic mode of constantly teaching and trying to make your customers smarter. That would also be something. Hope that's helpful.
That is very helpful. I can see a lot of overlap between branding and sales, and I can imagine that thinking at the area of how one, first identifies one's own strengths and values, but then also how you're communicating and portraying those to external audiences is, a lot about sales and a lot about kind of reading your audience and eliciting feedback so that you understand kind of where you are.
I encourage everybody, by the way, I think LinkedIn is a wonderful tool. I think it gives you a good idea of how many people are out there looking and seeing and connecting with you. I think it's a great business tool. I think it's worth having a profile. If you do have a profile, make sure you put a picture on. Make sure you put a professional picture on. Don't just cut off somebody from the other side so that somebody sees a hand on your shoulder and they don't know where it came from. But we, at many of our meetings, we will take pictures for our people so that they can have stuff to post online as a professional profile picture. It's important. And you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. Please do. Look at my background, look at people that I'm connected with. Fill in your education, fill things in, make connections. I think it's very helpful to people. I really do.
Yes, I think exploring the different ways to present oneself through career and branding tools like LinkedIn, and even the structure of one's resume or CV, and is really important. And maybe we'll touch on that in another masterclass. I do see we have another fantastic question from Sylvia: how to conduct self-assessment without, getting overly stuck in the weaknesses and being very hard on oneself, and instead finding the strength and the courage to step out of your comfort zone after such a self-assessment.
Right. Sylvia, it's a great question. So if you're already thinking about that, you might be hard on yourself. My suggestion would be is just take one bite of the elephant at a time, as they say, meaning pick one thing that you think you want to work on. Don't look at anything else, just one thing. Don't be too hard on yourself. Everybody has at least one thing that they want to work on. Pat yourself on the back for coming up with something and then work on it. Change is extremely difficult and it's never going to be perfect, but just take one thing at a time. See if it's important as you're working on it. Like, hey, am I seeing some improvement as a result? Do I feel better in these interactions as a result? What's happening as a result of it? It's really, really easy to be hard on yourself, because when you're done being hard on yourself, you're like, well, then I'm not going to do it. That's just ridiculous. So don't be hard on yourself. Give yourself credit for coming up with something, like take a pat on the back, look in the mirror and say, hey, way to go, Sylvia. And then after that, work on that one thing and see how you feel about it a few weeks later or a month later or a few months later. And then if you think that you're feeling better about that, then pick something else. But don't forget Don't forget, this is not about taking a list of 30 weaknesses and trying to make 30 new strengths. This is about understanding some things that would be good to haves. Like as a bad example, I'm not great at marketing. It would be good to be better at marketing. What does that mean? As opposed to, I am very good at bringing groups together and getting people to work towards a goal. Oh, what if I was amazing at that? What if I was amazing at getting lots of groups to work together on lots of things and accomplish an insane goal? What would that mean? That's the difference between those two things. So remember, it's easier to be self-critical than it actually is to find something good about yourself and make it better. At least that's my feeling.
That's great advice. Thank you, Andrew. I think focusing on those, extreme parameters of what your greatest strength is and what the weakness that you have identified as being something to work on is really the primary goal of that self-assessment process. And not everyone has clear eyes on what their true strength and weakness, what their true strengths and weaknesses are. And so getting honest feedback from others is the first step to really identifying what your greatest strength and your greatest weakness might be that are worth, working on to move that whole parameter of your skill set incrementally forward, which is the goal. I see we have a hand raised from Desire. Would you like to unmute?
Andrew, for your explanation about how to build a personal brand. And I thank you so much because I get to know how is personal brand, that it requires to be honest and to be trusted everywhere we are. And also it comprises strengths and weaknesses. But the question I have is about what you say about getting a mentor. I'd like to ask how to get a mentor. Which step can someone pass through so that can get a mentor? Is it an easy way to get it? Thank you.
Yeah, getting a mentor can be easy or extremely hard. It depends what situation you're in. So if you're a student, let's say, there may be a teacher that sees you in a class, and you might ask that person to be your mentor and use your experience in their class or in other places they see you as a place where you can get feedback from them. If you're in a business situation, it's very hard often to ask your immediate boss to be your mentor because that's kind of too close to home. Is there somebody just above that level that sees your performance occasionally that can give you feedback? Remember, the key thing in finding a mentor is somebody that's not just hearing about you from you, but somebody that is actually experiencing you in limited situations so that they can actually give you feedback as to what's happening because they're seeing you in action. If it's impossible for that to happen, then ask them how they might access a way to know about it. So as a bad example, your boss's boss is never in a meeting with you, but maybe they'll speak to your boss to find out what's going on. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you have your own business or a small business, maybe somebody else speaks to or does a survey of, under the guise of a survey with some of your clients to get some feedback as to how you're doing and some feedback for you. And then they use that as your mentor to give you some feedback and you have something for them to use. But my suggestion is to look for somebody, the biggest trait you're looking for in a mentor is somebody that's not afraid to deliver honest, kind, critical feedback. The second thing is that they actually have something to draw on to do that. So they have some experience with you or about you on a regular basis to draw on to do that. So you can find somebody that sees you a lot, but just tells you nice things. That's not going to help. You can find somebody who has no problem yelling and screaming at you and telling you how bad you are, but they really don't know what they're saying. They just like yelling bad things at you. That's not going to help either. But if you can find the combination of that, that's great. The last thing I would say also is suppose you don't get a perfect situation. It's not a very experienced person, but they're giving you really good feedback and observation. You could take that in a package, if you will, and go to somebody that you trust more or that you know is a little more savvy or worldly or older and say, hey, I have this mentor giving me some of this feedback from some of these situations. Can you help me interpret this? What questions might you have about this? And somebody might be able to view that and give you a good idea of what happened. I'll often do that with somebody. As Julian had asked, I'll say, we'll have the interview go, blah, 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 blah. And then you find out a week later, they didn't get the job. So the question I should have asked them was, you just finished the interview, 1 to 10, how did it go? I think it was like a 9. It's like, okay, what do you think they thought the interview was? No, 7 or 8. Interesting. Why is their view of the interview slightly different than yours? Well, at one point I saw a few of the people, and I saw this. Oh, okay, well, what was that? So you see, you start to play through and ask somebody to play through it with you, because somebody's feeling might be, phew, finished that interview. That was awesome. I was great. But then you ask, well, what did the other people think? It's a way of getting down to it to understand things. So that's part of what a mentor can help you do as well, which is to help you interpret feedback that you see or experiencing as well. But remember, if you can find somebody that experiences you and somebody that has the ability to be honest with you, honesty is huge. It doesn't mean somebody's lying. It means they're not scared to give you honest, unadulterated, hopefully kindly delivered feedback that is criticism that you can actually work with to better yourself.
That's great advice. I think, especially what is true in the early stage of your career is that you want to cast a broad net and get practice in just the skill of asking for feedback and receiving feedback. And as you do that more and more, you'll get better at it and be able to identify among those people that you elicit feedback from who might be a good long-term mentor based on the way they give you feedback and how useful it is and how well delivered it is, but also simply, practicing asking for feedback and receiving feedback with patience and grace and listening well is a skill that will only help you immensely in your career, in your personal life. And so practicing that and casting a broad net when you start out on this process of identifying, what your brand is a really important thing to do. And then kind of identify mentors from that process. I see we have another question. Is it Moise?
Yes, of course. I still have so many questions, but here I have one question what I need to know more. So the question is, how can someone leverage their personal brand to create opportunities for professional growth and advancement? Yes, that is my question.
How do you leverage personal brand for professional growth? Is that what I'm hearing, or is there more?
Yes, of course. I asked you, how can someone leverage their personal brand to create opportunities, professional growth, and advancement?
Investment.
I'm just going to jump in here. I think you're getting at, once you've identified what your brand, you want your brand to be, maybe, or I think developing a clear understanding of what your brand is at present and how to move your brand in the direction that you would like it to go, like what that goal should be and how to get there is the process that we're kind of addressing in this call. And that's the personal growth aspect that you kind of touched on in your question. And once you have done that, leveraging your brand, I imagine, would come much easier, is the idea. It will be clearer who you are and what you're about to the audiences that you are contacting or engaging with, and they will respond in a more clear fashion in kind of reverse also to you, because once people can clearly understand who you are and what you're about, they can both, respond with a yes or a no much faster because they understand, whether or not you match or you connect. I don't know if you have other thoughts on that, Andrew.
No, I was going to echo and just support what you're saying and maybe say it just in a 30,000 foot way to do, because I like what you're saying, Jillian. If you're being successful, Moise, in establishing your personal brand, and remember we talked about the success is that what you are projecting is being what's received, that will allow you to be more successful if you can from a personal growth perspective, because you're interacting with people at a better level. And then in turn, from a business perspective, people are more likely to want to invest with you or about you or for you, because you're making that connection of your brand is matching what they're viewing. So by creating a personal brand that you're able to express and have received at the same level, those two things should flow naturally from that occurrence happening. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, I think that's really helpful. And also, there's oftentimes kind of in the entrepreneurial context, people talk about your elevator pitch and the kind of words that you use to describe what you're selling. But personal branding is a more holistic kind of understanding of when you show up in those conversations before you even say any words, or in addition to the words you're saying, you are communicating a lot that in those initial seconds is information to the audience that they use to evaluate your elevator pitch. It's not just the pitch itself, but your brand as a whole. And so that will also impact the clarity of your message and whether or not your audience understands what you are selling or presenting, and has the ability even to then say yes or no with clarity as well. Don't say any additional questions at the moment. I don't know, Nadia, if you have any additional questions or thoughts, or if we should close out the session.
Just to appreciate Andrew for the amazing presentation. So if you would ask me for the feedback, I would say a 9 to 10.
I'll have to email you
Yeah.
separately, Nadia, to find out how I can be a 10 all the time.
Yeah. But a 9 to 10 is also very good. I think so. Mhm. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The participants who were able to join us, and to those who asked questions, I believe they triggered more thoughts from Andrew as well as Gillian for coming in. It was an amazing session. I learned some more values that we need to take into consideration in strengthening your personal brand. I know personal brand contributes a lot in shaping your career, helping you succeed at your workplace, advancing, like some of you were asking, advancing your careers and so on. So if you want to advance it, think about yourself. To wind up with just a small fun fact, recently I and my colleague, a friend had a mechanical issue. And then we were looking for a mechanic to help us. So it became so difficult to find a trustable mechanic, and we had to call on everyone we know, just asking, can you please help us find a trustable mechanic? Can we find a trustable mechanic? So you can see how trust alone can contribute a lot and strengthen someone's personal brand, actually. Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you. That's a great example.
Yes, that's a great example. Thank you so much, Nadia, for your help in putting this session together and gathering our fantastic audience with their wonderful questions. And Andrew, thank you as always for a 10 in presentation and such useful content to really aid early stage career professionals in continuing to grow and plan their career and identify how to get from point A to where their goals are. We really appreciate you.
Can I ask everybody, if you feel comfortable, connect with me on LinkedIn and, put something in LinkedIn, write something down, if you enjoyed it or something that you had from here. It's great for me because it allows me to build my network. It allows me to help other people and to connect with other people if they see that people are enjoying things like this. And this was a wonderful experience for me. So that's the one way I think we're all in the same world or in the same place is in the digital world. So please feel free to connect, put a comment in there, write something down, or start a discussion of some sort. I really enjoy those types of things.
Yes, and thank you. And speaking of the digital world, you can find Andrew's previous masterclass on our website at mirf.org. And I'll put that in the chat, and we'll have this masterclass up there shortly, I imagine. So thanks again for joining us, our live audience, and to all of those who have questions, feel free to also contact us afterwards.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was
Take
so nice
care.
to see everyone.